This video is brought to you by Skillshare, because I don't have the time to teach you everything. But to me, the best entry in the Sherlock Holmes universe to date is 2011's A Game of Shadows, which by the way I think is one of the smartest stories ever crafted, but that's a topic for another time. Ever since seeing Sherlock Holmes A Game of Shadows in theaters all the way back in 2011, for nearly a decade now there's been just one big unsolvable conundrum stuck in my mind. Where's the next one? Where's the third Sherlock Holmes movie? Apparently the main culprit behind me having to pose that question is the script. Over the years they've had a bunch of different writers come in to try and write the third movie. They've even had entire rooms of writers try to write it. But despite all that, they just haven't managed to crack it. And the reason why that is, I deduce, is the very same reason why A Game of Shadows, from me at least, left such a lasting impression. It's pretty damn smart. Or, like I said a couple of years ago, one of the smartest, wittiest, most intelligent movies you'll find. And as to why exactly that is, there's a couple of very obvious, very elementary explanations. Firstly, it features main characters who are as smart as any characters can be. Secondly, it's directed by a guy who is the cheekiest, wittiest visual filmmaker out there. And when you put these two together, that's when you get stuff that is pretty damn entertainingly big brain.
There's only one way out of this place.
Right you are. Ah, ingenious.
Unfortunately, that doesn't really help ordinary chaps like you and me, because not every movie can feature a highly intellectual hero. Not every movie can be directed by this visual mastermind of a guy. So I guess for all of us, all hope is lost. But fortunately, it turns out that the case here is that not being the case. Because in addition to just more obvious surface level intellectual aspects about A Game of Shadows like that, there's also a few other more shadowy narrative factors in game here that do play a massive part in making this movie feel like the super smart intellectual movie that it is. A few very secretive writing hacks, you might say, that anyone can use in any movie to instantly boost that movie's apparent IQ by tenfold. Maybe you're someone working on your own project in an effort to prove yourself as a smart, noteworthy writer. Maybe you're yet another pro trying to crack the uncrackable case of the third Holmes movie in an effort to recapture the smarts of A Game of Shadows. Whatever the case, think of this video as a narrative doctor here to assist you. Let's drive our 1891 supercar out to the whatever Bleecker Street in order to learn what narrative tricks A Game of Shadows utilizes to leave such an entertaining intellectual impression. Let's find out how to make a movie that is big brain. The first intellectual writing aspect to take from A Game of Shadows is the simply incredible way it continuously organically shifts and changes the character dynamics within scenes and sequences, specifically relationship dynamics and power dynamics. With the former, I essentially mean that this movie establishes a clear, understandable relationship between characters for a specific scene, only to then all of a sudden flip that relationship on its head and keep flipping it. Like for example happens in the stag party section. Basically, Holmes takes Watson out to party before his wedding and then goes to meet this gypsy fortune teller Simsa to hear his future, meaning that when the scene starts, the relationship between Holmes and Simsa is established to be purely neutrally transactional until...
Powerful bond. But between whom? A brother and sister perhaps? And I see a name. Yes, it's... Renee.
When Holmes reveals that he's actually here about Simsa's lost brother, it changes their relationship to something entirely else. What started off as a purely neutral transaction has now become personal and hostile, which in of itself makes the exposition in this scene much more interesting to watch. And when the conflict and hostility grows to the point of Simsa throwing Holmes out, then this happens.
There's a man concealed in the rafters above us. A Cossack renowned for their infeasible acrobatic abilities and notorious for moonlighting as assassins.
When it's revealed that this whole time there's been a hidden assassin in the scene with plans to kill Simsa, which then leads to Holmes activating his Sherlock vision mode to see how to deal with the assassin, that changes the relationship up again. This time into the form that Simsa is actually a damsel in distress and Holmes a gallant hero here to save her. Until once more... When Simsa cuts Holmes's planned attack short by proving herself as a competent fighter able to take care of herself, the relationship finally shifts into its ultimate true form that we continue later: allies. As in this one single scene, we go from these two being neutral transaction partners to hostiles to damsel and hero to allies. Just in a couple minutes, this movie manages to build a fully three-dimensional feeling relationship between Holmes and Simsa where we actually care about their relationship as well as them. And in terms of both the scene and the characters, that's pretty damn smart writing right there. On the other end, we have power dynamics where the relationship between characters stays pretty much the same but still constantly fluctuates in terms of who truly is in control of the scene. In other words, you have one character hold the power in a scene but then have another character make a move that steals that power away. And even though there's a bunch of great examples in this movie to choose from, the very best of them is the one of the smartest scenes I've ever seen in any movie: the ending clash between Holmes and Moriarty. In a nutshell, when the scene begins, we know that Moriarty has planted an assassin among leaders of nations right inside the mansion they're at, and that the assassin will begin a world war between nations like Moriarty planned, meaning that Moriarty holds the upper hand power in this scene. But suddenly, Holmes makes a move in which they capture the assassin, which not only stops the war but also incriminates Moriarty as the culprit, meaning that now Holmes holds the upper hand power in the scene. But then Moriarty has the assassin murdered and informs Holmes that war is inevitable, that he can just sit back with his assets and fortunes and wait. And with that, the scene seems to be over, with Moriarty emerging as the winner. Or so it would appear.
About that fortune of yours, I believe it's just been substantially reduced.
Suddenly, Holmes reveals that he knows about Moriarty's red book, which is the key to all his assets and fortunes. Oh, but then turns out that Moriarty has the book coded in a way that can't be cracked. Oh, but then turns out that Holmes found the codebreaker for it and has already began confiscating Moriarty's assets and fortunes. But then Moriarty takes his gloves off and plans to get back at Holmes by killing Watson and his wife. But then Holmes uses his Sherlock vision mode to defeat him in physical combat like he's always done before. But then...
Come now. You really think you're the only one who can play this game? Trap arm. Target weakness.
You get the idea. This entire scene is these two characters making moves and actions that swings the power of the scene in their favor. This entire scene is like a never-ending roller coaster back and forth battle between these characters and their conflict-filled relationship, which not only makes the scene incredibly effective overall, but also makes it feel really freaking intelligent. And you don't need characters with big brains to do this. All you need is characters with clear conflicting goals, so that whenever your hero takes one step closer to their objective, that by default means that their opponent is taking one step away from theirs. The second aspect to note about this movie is its very excellent use of narrative through lines, which are basically ideas or objects or anything of that nature used to embody the essence of your movie. There might be a couple different perceptions of the literal meaning of this term, but what I mean here is somewhat similar to setups and payoffs, where you plant an element in the story and then bring that element back later for some kind of a resolution. Setups and payoffs in of themselves are always very nice, and there is a big bunch of them here as well.
Still don't see me.
Hey, Shirley, put that down.
What is this contraption? Can I have it?
Mary? Who delivered this parcel? Peculiar.
But if you want to take a step further and really make your movie stand out in this regard, then you need to take your setup and instead of just paying it off at some point, drag it along your entire narrative to visually symbolize what the narrative is. A Game of Shadows, for example, above all else is a game of cat and mouse between Holmes and Moriarty. And so in order to visually showcase this game of cat and mouse, it deliberately introduces not actual cats and mice, but instead this idea of the fisherman and the fish.
Fischerweiser. Schubert. Den Fisch betrugst du nicht. Give up your foolish trickery.
This fish you cannot cheat.
A fisherman grows weary of trying to catch an elusive fish. So he muddies the water, confuses the fish. He doesn't realize until too late that it has swum into a trap.
Essentially, the point of the relationship between Holmes and Moriarty is to figure out which of them is the fisherman as in the predator and which of them is the fish as in the prey. And the further we go and the more times we revisit and build on this question, the more clear it becomes that Moriarty is the fisherman here. That he's the cat, he's the one above Holmes in the natural food chain who will inevitably reign supreme. But then at the very end, when Holmes reveals that he has just ruined all of Moriarty's plans by taking away his assets and fortunes, we get this insanely satisfying big brain ultimate payoff resolution to this cat and mouse through line to hammer it in with, when we realize that even though Holmes in this relationship is indeed the fish, that doesn't mean he is the prey.
How much more is there?
That's the end of page 2. Page 3.
Another good visual symbolizer of the essence of this movie is the chess, because as much as this film is about a game of cat and mouse between Holmes and Moriarty, it's also about an actual game of chess between them, where they each take turns to make moves in an effort to continuously one-up and defeat each other, which once again is visually made very clear. And after revisiting and building on this chess element throughout the movie, the whole thing ultimately leads to this culmination finale confrontation where Holmes and Moriarty finally sit down to actually play a game of chess, which in addition to being just a physical game, also at the same time represents their moves in real life.
We both have 2 bishops.
May I remind you, this is blitz chess. A single miscalculation will cost you the game.
If I tackle the wrong man to the ground, I could start a war.
I think you've just lost your most valuable piece.
When Holmes and Moriarty move their chess pieces, it symbolizes how they're moving their own people in the field to either complete or prevent the assassination. When Moriarty says that Holmes just lost his most valuable piece, it symbolizes how Holmes just lost his only witness who can incriminate Moriarty. When Holmes makes a checkmate, it means that not only is their chess game over, but also that Moriarty's plans are over. And all this, simply put, is astoundingly smart writing that produces an incredible finale as well as an incredible road to it. And all you need to do to achieve this is to first identify the essence of your movie and then find a visual way to symbolize it, which ultimately leads to a conclusion where that symbol is being used to visually resolve the essence of what your movie is. The third and final lesson to learn from A Game of Shadows is the way it manages to make its characters into real-life people with real-life three-dimensional personalities, which it accomplishes by differentiating what characters feel versus what they reveal to others around them. For example, the central characters in this movie are Holmes and Watson and the relationship they hold. And on the surface, they and their relationship are very shallow and two-dimensional. Basically, the dynamic between them is that Holmes is a cold, selfish douchebag who doesn't care about other people, including Watson's new wife, which in turn makes Watson pretty much despise him in a way that he just constantly bickers and complains at him.
You completely forgot about my stag party, didn't you?
I'm on my honeymoon!
I barely noticed your absence.
Did you kill my wife? Did you just kill my new wife?
But instead of just leaving it there on the surface like your average summer blockbuster, the movie delves much deeper into these characters and their relationship in a way that makes it very clear to the audience that there is something more going on. See, despite Holmes acting like a cold, selfish douchebag who treats Watson and his new wife Mary like air, he doesn't actually do that just because he's a cold, selfish douchebag. The real reason he does that is because underneath that cold, selfish douchebag shell, he's actually a very caring companion who's just scared that this marriage will make him lose his only friend. He doesn't reveal it to Watson or to anybody else, but it is very clearly how he truly feels.
Tonight you'll settle down, have a family, and I'll die alone.
At this moment, are you as happy as you would be on your honeymoon in Brighton?
Who'd have known that honeymooning in Brighton was such a dangerous notion?
Is that what this is about?
And the reason it is so important to keep Holmes's true feelings under the surface is because that's what makes him complex, that's what gives him depth, that's what makes him seem real. Because in real life, people don't just openly convey their most inner feelings and emotions. When people care about someone, they might not reveal it until they're about to lose them. When people are scared of someone, they might try to act like they aren't in order to stand their ground. When people are obsessively trying to stop a bad guy from doing bad things, they might actually be doing so because that said bad guy murdered the one person they deep down truly loved. But in addition to just character building, you can and should also use this mentality in interactions that characters have in individual scenes, by presenting the scene one way, but in actuality having it be the exact opposite. Whenever Holmes and Moriarty meet, for example, they always act friendly and cordial, but in the subtext of the scenes, it's very clear that their true feelings toward each other are anything but friendly and cordial.
I read that the good doctor was to be married today. How was the service?
Definitive. He'll no longer be party to my investigations.
I'll be sure to send my regards to the happy couple.
When Holmes tells Moriarty that Watson is married now, what he's really saying is that there's no reason for Moriarty to hurt him. When Moriarty sends his regards to Watson and his new wife, what he's really saying is that he will kill them both. And the reason he doesn't just say that is because by keeping it in the subtext, it allows the tension of the scene to grow and grow and grow without popping. That allows the tension of this relationship to keep growing and growing and growing without ever popping, until at the very end where it's finally resolved.
My most loathed Mary, I do not love you, I never wish to see you again. Fret not, it's a double encryption, my dear. If the first letter of the message is a consonant, then what follows is the mirrored truth.
I see.
And when you take this feel versus reveal narrative factor and combine it with what we talked about before, that's how you start building towards a movie that is truly big brain. That's how you get one step closer to successfully writing that unwritable third Sherlock Holmes movie. I'm not saying this is all you need, but I am saying all this is what you do need to get started.
Someone tell Filmento to delete themselves.
I've done it. I found the worst
YouTube
channel.
As this channel has grown recently, there's been an increasing amount of Filmento haters popping up on Twitter, with some even going as far as to try to cherry pick and discredit the points I make in my videos. And the thing this has made me finally realize is that there's a lot of people out there who still don't know even the basics of screenwriting. Which is why for this video I've joined forces with Skillshare in order to rectify this problem. Maybe you already know, but basically Skillshare is like a learning community website where you get to gain all kinds of big brain skills and knowledge, including all things filmmaking and writing. For example, there's this really useful screenwriting class held by this writer John Watts, who goes through all the basics that you need to be aware of when writing a film script. So if screenwriting is something you want to try out, or if you just want to become knowledgeable enough to successfully dunk on me on Twitter, I highly recommend it. Premium membership for Skillshare costs a bit less than $10 a month, but you don't need to worry about that, my friend, because if you just click the link in the description before 1,000 other people do, you'll get 2 months of it for free. So, click the link below, check out Skillshare for whatever new big brain creative stuff you want to explore. It'll really help me out, it'll really help you out.